today, because we're getting toward the end of the year, Christmas is coming, New Year's. So today I'm going to talk about vice and virtue. But before I do, I want to go over something that toward the end of the class last time, and it was because it was the end of the class, I didn't get a lot of chance to go into detail. There's still some people who don't understand what I'm talking about when I say that evil is a no thing. It's like light and dark. There is really no such thing as dark. Dark is the absence of light. If there's no light, then it's dark. Well, if there's no good in you, then you're evil. But evil itself is not a thing. You're composed of two parts, a body and a soul. Your soul, you were made in the image and likeness of God. So the part of you that is like God is in your soul. You don't look like him. You can't think about God as having, hair and eyes and whatever. We'll know when we get there, but he's a pure spirit, and your soul is a pure spirit. But that's not the only thing that is in you that is like God. What is in you that is like God is the sanctifying grace in your soul that you received at baptism. That is a part of God in you. And as long as and that is what good is. Good is that grace in your soul. Your body is a vessel. It's just a container that holds that grace. It holds your soul. And when that container is broken in death, your soul will go to be judged. You'll get the body back later, but the important part is that when you go to be judged, what you have in that container is what you're going to be judged on. So if you have sanctifying grace in your soul, then you will be rewarded. If you have nothing in your soul, you will go to hell. Good is the grace that's in your soul. Being empty, having nothing, is evil. So when we say a person is evil, we're really asking, are they in sanctifying grace or not? If they have sanctifying grace, even a small amount of it, they're good. And they're good in proportion to that grace that they have. You can increase sanctifying grace through the sacraments and other meriting. That's why you have a body. The body and the soul work together. The soul can't merit anything on its own. It needs the body to do that. So when we say that a person is evil, we're really asking how much do they have sanctifying grace? If they have no sanctifying grace, then they're evil. But they have the potential to be good. Because as long as there's life, they have the potential of putting grace in their soul. The devil is evil. There's no chance of him obtaining grace. He had his chance, he lost it. He's evil. Souls in hell are evil because, again, their death is past. There's no more chance for them to put grace in their souls. So they're evil. But human beings, as long as they live, they'll go back and forth between good and evil, or between good and more good, or good and no good is really the way it is. So with that in mind, today we're going to talk about vice and virtue. And our Lord said that you have to be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. Nothing that is not perfect will enter heaven. Well, right away you're kind of daunted, well, how can I ever be perfect? And what is the perfection of God that we have to strive for? Well, we already talked about what is God. God is love. And love is sacrifice. So God is all love. He's complete love. He's complete all good. He's all goodness. He's all grace. So that's what we need to strive for, is to increase our love so that we are like God. We'll never be as perfect as God is. He's God. God, as St. Joan of Arc said one time, God doesn't require the victory, only the struggle. The victory is God's, but you have to work at it. And our Lord said, the kingdom of heaven suffereth violence, and the violent bear it away. What does he mean? You should go out and kill people? No. The violence he's talking about is violence to yourself. In order to increase in love, in order to love God, in order to be good, you have to do violence to yourself. You have to overcome your faults. You have to overcome your vices. All those things that lead towards sin. You can't get into heaven without doing violence to yourself. We have to do violence to ourselves because of concupiscence, that irrationality that came with the first sin. It's one of the causes, one of the results of original sin. It's easier to be bad than to be good. So if you want to be good, you have to do violence. You have to overcome that inclination towards being bad. Charity is considered the mother of all virtues. All virtues depend upon charity. Why? Because charity is love. It's just another word for love. And we want to be like God. We want that perfection of God. We need to be as charitable as God is. We need to be full of love. And the difference between vice and virtue is founded in love, but true love, love of God, where vice is founded in love of ourselves. And that's why you have to do violence to yourself. You have to overcome that. I love myself better than everybody else. I love myself better than God. We make these bad choices, we commit sins because we love ourselves more than God at the moment when we commit the sin. So you have to do violence to yourself. And those choices are never easy, and that's where the violence comes in. So what is vice? It's a habit, and so is virtue, a habit. Vice is a habit of committing a sin. Virtue is the habit of doing good. Habits are not formed by doing something once. You murder one person, you don't have the vice of murder, of being a murderer. You're patient with your brothers and sisters once in your life. I'm sorry, you don't have the virtue of patience. Patience to have the virtue of patience, you have to be patient over and over and over again. To have a vice of, let's say, of anger, you have to be angry over and over and over again. So vice and virtues are things you have to practice, either in one direction or the other. So it's necessary but all of the, most vices and virtues have their roots in some very particular vices and virtues. So we're going to look at those. We refer to the 7 capital sins. Those are, or sometimes they're referred to as the 7 deadly sins. Capital because they're most important, and deadly because they can lead to the death of the soul. So these are the 7 sins that almost all the other sins result from. These are the roots of the tree of vice. So what are they? They're pride, covetousness, lust, anger, gluttony, envy, and sloth, or sloth. Now all right, those of you who are grammar practitioners, and I'm a grammar teacher, the word can be pronounced properly either way, sloth or sloth. Sloth actually, though, refers to the animal, the slow-moving animal, the 3-toed or 2-toed sloth. When we refer to the vice, it's usually sloth. So if you pronounce it sloth, you would not be correct either. But nobody refers to the animal as a sloth. He's a sloth. So, moving on. Pride and its opposing, I wouldn't say opposing so much, it's virtue, humility. for every vice there is a contrary virtue. The one is a fault, and the other will lead us to goodness. So pride. What is pride? It's an inordinate love of yourself, of your own excellence. It's rooted in self-love. And almost all the other vices, including the other 7 capital sins, have their roots in pride. Our love for ourselves. We do. We love ourselves more than anything else. And the amount that you love yourself and the way that you love yourself will cause those other sins. So pride. We love ourselves and the world more than anything else. And humility is based on truth. In fact, there are theologians who say humility is truth. If you can face the truth, if you know the truth, you will be humble. Saying the truth is not pride. Saying the truth is humility. But you need to say the truth as it really is. You're a creature and God is a creator. In pride, we put ourselves ahead of God. That was the sin of Satan. That was the sin of Adam and Eve. They put themselves ahead of their creator. With humility, you put God in his proper place. You tell the truth. God is the important one. God is the creator, and I am his subject. All the good that I do is really through his grace working in me. If you put yourself in your role as under God, you will see things from an entirely different perspective. We tend to look at things from our viewpoint instead of from God's viewpoint. If you turn it around, you will start seeing yourself in an entirely different way, and you will be able to become more humble. As Francis de Sales said, however, it's going to be a lifelong battle, and it won't happen until after you die. St. Francis de Sales said, self-love dies 15 minutes after we do. So you may be able to decrease, the amount of pride. You'll increase the humility, but don't expect it to go away entirely. I know, because I've been working on it for a long time. My superior thought, everybody has what they call a predominant fault. That is the fault, and everybody is different. That is the fault that you have that causes you to commit the sins that you do. It's the basis for you for the other things. It could be one of the 7 capital sins, but it could be something else entirely. One of the other ones that we're not talking about. Usually it'll be based in one of these. So what is your predominant fault? Well, you won't find that out unless when you examine your conscience, you look carefully at why you commit those sins. When do you commit those sins? What was the purpose? What prompted you to do it? You have to know yourself. And you really need to, when you examine your conscience, examine that part of it too, so that you know why you do the things that you do. And because you'll find there's layers. You'll peel off the first layer. Oh, this is my predominant fault. And then you'll find that was caused by something else. That self-love, that pride, was really caused by something else under deeper, or even deeper than that, or deeper than that. And you just have to keep peeling away the layers till you find the real one that is the bottom. My superior thought that my predominant fault was pride. Now, she wasn't wrong. I am very proud. But that's not my predominant fault. After I peel away the layers, I found, no, there was something else that was causing me to be proud. And you need to find that root. And one of in her zeal for me to become humble, but in the convent, when you do something wrong, you're usually given a penance for it. The penance that she would give me was, I had to read the chapters on humility by St. Alphonse Rodriguez. And there's like 8 or 12 chapters. And I think I probably had them memorized by the time I was, she moved on to something else. And I had to read them kneeling in the at 5 o'clock in the morning, kneeling in the middle of the chapel, on the floor. So it was, but it didn't help me. Alfonso Rodriguez talked a lot about the value of humility and why it's so important. And that all I understood, but he never said, how do you become humble? And that's what I was looking for. How do you become humble? And he didn't give me an answer. So I had to go look for answers to other places. I found a great deal of help in this book, Humility of Heart by Father Cajetan Mary de Bergamo. There was another book that was even better. It was by Bishop Olenthorn, and I don't know the name of it. It's out of print. We had it in the convent library. I haven't been able to find it since a lot of our books were destroyed by termites here in Louisiana, and only a major part of the library was ruined by them. So it was probably one of the books we lost. But anyway, I think it was through Father Olenthorn, I came up with a way to work on getting, increasing a virtue. And you have to look at it this way. Think of your soul as a garden. And that garden is full of flowers, which are virtues, and full of weeds, which are the vices and faults that you have. Now, if you are working in a garden, what's the first thing you do? You want to pull out the weeds. But that's not really the first thing you do. The first thing you do is you have to identify the weeds, or you're going to be pulling out the plants, the flowers. Because when they're sprouting, there's no flower on it. It's hard to tell the difference between one and the other. You have to find out, what are the weeds? What are the weeds in your garden? What are the faults that you have? Again, it comes down to recognizing it. And once you recognize it, you have to admit it to yourself. You have to say, yeah, I'm proud. Yeah, I'm lazy. Yeah, I'm whatever. I'm angry. I have a bad temper. You have to admit it to yourself. You can't, it's like with grammar. You can't fix a grammar problem until you admit that you're making it. And once you admit that you're making it, you'll begin to notice when you do it, when you say the wrong thing. She learned me that. No, she taught me that. Once you recognize it, you'll hear it. Until that point, you won't notice. Same thing with a vice. Once you recognize it, you say, I've done that, you'll start to notice when you are proud, when you are angry, when you are lazy. So your first thing is you have to recognize it. Then you have to pull them out. Not only do you pull them, once you pull out the weeds, you've got all this empty space, and the weeds will come right back unless you fill it up with plants. So you not only have to pull out the weeds, you have to plant the flowers. You have to increase the virtues. You have to put, if pride is your problem, you have to pull out the pride, but you have to increase humility. And how do you do that? Well, you have to fertilize and water your garden as well. Water is to the garden prayer. You have to pray for it. This was a big eye-opener for me when I found out that you have to pray for the virtue. You have to pray for humility. And whatever book that I read, and I think it was Olenthorn, had a beautiful prayer for humility, which I wrote down. It's now on my cell phone. It's also written on the back of my picture of St. John, so I could flip it over in the morning when I, kneel by the bed and say morning prayers, flip it over and pray for humility every day. It's down on my cell phone because, you could take it with you wherever you go. But anyway, I'll post it on the web page. And it's not only works for humility, it works for any virtue that you have to pray for it. Once you recognize you're deficient in it, then you have to pray for it. That's planting it. That's watering it. And you have to fertilize. Fertilize is, you have to spend time regularly in spiritual reading. If you know you have a problem with humility, then read a book about it. Read the chapters on Rodriguez. It's, and then read Humility of Heart. Read some other books. Lives of the Saints are very good, but don't make a complete diet of the Lives of the Saints. The Lives of the Saints will tell you what they did and how they got there, but they don't really tell you specifically how they overcame those problems. You need other spiritual reading for that. So, read books like Abandonment to Divine Providence, or there's books, The Interior Castle by Teresa of Avila, there's tons of books. Now, I don't suggest you sit down and read it cover to cover, read a little bit of it. It's going to be heavy going. It's going to be like walking through the mud, and so there's a lot of information in a very short space. So read a page or two. I really suggest, though, as a starting point, get a copy of The Imitation of Christ and just open it at random. Don't start at the beginning of the book and read to the end. Open it at random to any page. It will be as if it was written exactly for you. I know a lot of people who do this. Just open The Imitation of Christ at any page and read one page. There's a lot on one page. Read until something will jump off the page as you say, oh wow, I never understood that, or yeah, this is like he's talking to me. Just read that much and then think about that. Don't go further than that. Bishop Goodyear said that the most excellent way is to read the life of Christ. So yes, you should on a regular basis read some part of the New Testament. I really suggest, though, you get Bishop Goodyear's 3 volumes of the life of Christ, 2 volumes of the public life of our Lord, and the 3rd volume is his Passion. You will understand more about Christ and the Bible and the New Testament, and it is easy reading in that it's not easy like children's reading, but it's easy adult reading. He doesn't write like a theologian and you're supposed to know all the jargon. He makes our Lord come off of the pages. You get to understand Christ as a real person. And since our religion is Christ, understanding Christ and knowing him will make your life so much easier. So I really suggest getting, and it's still in print. You can get it out there. I think St. Paul Publications has reprinted it, but you can still get some of the hardcovers from used bookstores. You can borrow mine. I think I have 2 sets. I can only lend one. The other one I use all the time. Constantly going back and reading sections of it. So anyway, that's how you work on getting a virtue, those 3 steps. Identify it, admit to it, then work on doing the violence. Pulling weeds is violent. Pull it out, replant the virtue. Pray for the grace, pray for the virtue, and do spiritual reading. All right, so with that in mind, the second one is covetousness and liberality. Another word for covetousness is avarice, and that's an excessive love of worldly things, very prevalent in this world today. We love our leisure, we love our things, our gadgets, our phones, our homes, our cars, whatever. And money, power. And avarice is an excessive love. We commit the sin of avarice when we're willing to violate the law of God to obtain them, or when we hold them unjustly, or when we're not willing to open our hearts to the needy and sacrifice those worldly things for the cause of God. That's when you, just because you like having a cell phone or having a car does not make you avaricious. It's at what point you become avaricious is when you're willing to put that ahead of your love of God. When it's more important to work on Sunday, to keep your business open on Sunday so you can make more money, then you've passed the boundary line. So if you look at it as is this avarice causing you to violate the laws of God, to hold on to something unjustly, to not be fair to your employees, to hold on to your money, not to be willing to help the poor and the needy, or not to be willing to use your money for God's good. The church needs a new roof. Well, I'm not donating to that. That sort of thing. Liberality is the opposing virtue, and that's liberality is again looking on things rightly. Everything really belongs to God. What you have came from Him. You should be willing to return it. And by the way, God will never be outdone in generosity. The more you give away, the more you will get. Maybe not the same way that, what you want, but you will get. The more you give away, the more generous you are in any way with God, with your time, with your money, with your things, with whatever, God will give you back. In this life, God will not be outdone in generosity. Third one is lust, and its opposing virtue is chastity. And we'll really go more into this when we get to the commandment, the sixth commandment. But lust is the vice by which men seek their own happiness in impure pleasure. And chastity keeps our minds and our eyes focused on a heavenly goal, and our true purpose in life. The fourth one is anger, and its opposing virtue is meekness. Anger is a strong desire to punish another by inflicting injury on him. Not just getting angry and losing your temper. That's not really what they're talking about here. Sometimes anger is justified. It's justified when it's what we call righteous anger, when you're angry on God's part. Our Lord drove the sellers out of the temple. That was righteous anger. They had no right to be selling there. He was angry for the injustice that they were doing to God. And that's righteous anger. The anger they're talking about here is the kind of anger that will cause you to want to punish someone else, to get even with them, to seek revenge, to wish them harm in some way. When you get angry enough to punch somebody, you're doing violence to them. You're inflicting injury on them. Meekness is a companion of patience, but they're two different virtues, meekness and patience. But they work together. They're like a duo, a dynamic duo sort of thing. They control anger and make the individual look more to the good of the other person and to look at the person and try to understand rather than the wrong that they committed. Well, why, this person insulted me. Why did they insult me? Did I really do something wrong? Maybe they're just upset. Recently their mother died, and maybe they're just thinking about that. You you're not thinking about the injury, you're thinking about the person and why did they do what they did. And you want to help them. Gluttony and temperance. Gluttony is a sin of eating or drinking to excess. And most people do not really suffer from gluttony in the matter of food. In fact, usually most sins of gluttony pertaining to food are usually venial sins. Sins of gluttony that become mortal are usually in the excessive drinking area. When you drink alcohol or other stimulants, which to a point where you can no longer think or reason, then you've committed mortal sin. When you've lost the ability to control yourself, that's at that point you're at the point of mortal sin. And a boy who tries to persuade a girl to drink against her wishes is offering her an insult. Because the action that he's taking, trying to induce her to drink, shows that he considers her capable of yielding to a suggestion opposed to her better instincts. So that's why he's insulting her. And girls need to be careful of that. And the boys, if he can't get your virtue some other way, he may offer you, he may be able to get it by drinking, or you're drinking, so be careful. He's insulting you, and you are weak. You're actually going to weaken yourself, and you may give in because again, alcohol will mars your reason. You lose the ability to think. Temperance is the virtue opposed to gluttony, and again, food and drink are good in themselves. There's nothing wrong with drinking, unlike some of the Baptists and other religions out there. You can't have alcohol. Our Lord had no problem changing water into wine. There's nothing wrong with wine. There's nothing wrong with drinking. The point is when you go to excess, when you go beyond a normal bounds, and everybody knows what their limits are. Maybe not the first time, but after that you should. So the first time there would be no mortal sin involved because again, you didn't know. But after that point, and the next time you do know what your limit is. So then it becomes mortal. It's the abuse that is wrong. And temperance is to try to guide us, again, to stay within our bounds. Envy and charity. Now, the charity here is not quite the original charity that I talked about. Here it's, envy is being sad at the good fortune of another person. We wish it had happened to us. There's nothing wrong with wishing it happened to us, but at the point where you wish that anything good didn't happen to them, now you're envious. Oh, they won the lottery. I wish I'd have won the lottery. Think what I could do with it. But I'm not wishing that you didn't win the lottery. I wish, I hope all the money, you read about all these people who win the lottery and their lives are ruined. I hope that happens to you. Now you're envious. Sloth and diligence. Or sloth and diligence. Sloth is the sin of loving bodily comfort and ease to the point where we neglect our duties. There's nothing wrong with having a good time or relaxing. You put in a hard day's work, sitting down and reading a good book or playing a game or watching a movie or on the TV or something. There's nothing wrong with that. But at the point where you're neglecting your duties, you're not making dinner for the family or whatever, then it's become sinful. It's no longer just relaxation, and now it's a sin. So when you neglect your duties, and and that can be both either temporal or spiritual. You have spiritual duties you have to fulfill too. And there are a lot of people who don't mind working really hard, and they, in their temporal life, they're hard workers, but they don't put any time in on their spiritual life. That's spiritual laziness. And that is sinful. In fact, it's more deadly and more detrimental than the physical sloth. And so sloth, you can also describe it as a wasting of time in excessive recreation. Excessive recreation. Recreation is good for you. We need a certain amount of it. St. Claude de Colombière said it's good for religious to go on vacation occasionally to get a little, it enervates you to come back and work harder. And that's what recreation should be. But if all you're doing is having recreation all the time, and you spend as little time as possible saying your prayers or working, or are you wasting, not only wasting your time, you're wasting your life. Diligence is the opposing virtue. It's also called industry. And spiritual diligence keeps us alert to opportunities to serve God. With sloth, we waste time. With diligence, we see around us opportunities to use our time for good. So those are the 7 capital sins. Now, there are also 4 major virtues. As I said, charity is the mother of all virtues, but the cardinal virtues are the 4 virtues. You could call them her elder daughters. Prudence, justice, temperance. And temperance here is a little different than the other temperance, the one in gluttony. It's more rounded out, fuller. And fortitude. Prudence, justice, temperance, and fortitude. Prudence is a virtue that teaches us when and how to act in things pertaining to our salvation. It's good judgment. Spiritual good judgment. That's what prudence is. Justice is a virtue that inclines us to render to God what is due to him, and to man what is due to him. Justice. Giving each what is their due. Temperance is a virtue that prevents us from going to excess, not just in food or drink, in anything. Remember I said the church doesn't like excess. If you go too much in any one direction, you're out of the church. Temperance is that balance. You shouldn't be eating, in gluttony, you shouldn't be eating to excess, but the same thing. You shouldn't be fasting so that you become sick and ill and die either. It's a balance. You shouldn't think everything is a sin. You shouldn't think that nothing is a sin. It's that balance. And it works with meekness to restrain our anger, keeping us from punishing too harshly, or spoiling or overindulging. Parents, they have this, you have to walk a tight line. If you punish a kid too much, he may give up. He may begin to hate you. But if you can't give him everything, overindulgence ruins the kid too. Temperance is that when to be strict, when to be kind. Smile while you're hitting him, spanking him, whatever. I don't know, but we can also harm by being too generous or being too stingy. It's that excess. Every vice or virtue has, an excess to it. Can be too angry or too lenient, too whatever. Fortitude is a virtue that strengthens us in our duty in spite of all the obstacles. It helps us to overcome them. And they're all based on charity. Again, the charity is the mother of all virtues. So it's based on that. And so prudence, if you want to, the way it describes it is this: prudence is love, looking forward to ward off the danger and promote the welfare of the one that we love. Again, it is love, but it's love that looks for opportunities to help and any kind of danger that might hurt. Justice is love, seeking to promote the good of others and giving them what is their due. Temperance is love, using everything in proper moderation and giving others just what's the right amount of help, no more and no less. Fortitude is love, strong as death, continuing to work despite the odds against it. Guided by faith, spurred on by hope, love pursues its course to good work in the end. So again, everything is founded in charity and love. A person can overcome any habit or vice, no matter how firmly rooted, first, if he combats it constantly. Again, doing violence to yourself. If he combats it intelligently, recognizing it, praying for the virtue. If he prays for God's assistance daily, if he uses the sacramental helps that God offers him, and if he avoids the occasions of sin. And again, you need to know yourself so you recognize when those occasions will be there. Now, besides all of that, there is still another thing I can offer you to help you. And I suggest that this might be something you might want to work on in the coming year. It makes a good New Year's resolution. We've talked last time about the examination of conscience. There's another examination of conscience that religious use. And I don't know why they don't talk about it, because it's very good for lay people as well. It's called the particular examination of conscience. None of you ever heard about it. The particular examination of conscience is not concerned with sin. It's concerned with faults. You pick a fault that you have, that you want to work on. Maybe it's anger. Maybe you're just plain annoying to your brothers and sisters. Maybe you don't do your chores until your mother is actually breathing down your neck and threatening, you with punishment. Whatever, you pick a fault. And if you don't know it, you can ask your parents, I'm sure that, or even your siblings, they'll be more than happy to enlighten you as to what your faults are. But anyway, you pick a fault, and you're going to work on that fault for 30 days, for a month. And you're going to examine your conscience every day, at some time in the day. It doesn't have to be at night. It can be, in the convent we do it at noontime. So you can kind of check between breakfast and lunchtime how many times you committed it. And then when you examine your conscience at night, you might want to check again as to from noon till night how many times, so you can get a better idea of it. So you examine yourself for this fault, and you keep a record. As I said, with examining your conscience, I wouldn't keep a record of your venial sins, just know which ones they are so you can know yourself better. The mortal sins you do need to keep a record of. You don't need to write them down, but at least keep a mental record. But this, I suggest getting a calendar, writing it down on the calendar, the number of times you committed that fault that day. You don't have to write on the calendar what fault you're working on. You can use a code, you can just put a number. All right, let's see, I'm working on not annoying my sister. And so, by the end of the day, I've done it 7 times today. And the next day, I've done it 15 times. Next day, I've done it 27 times. So I'm not getting any better, am I? But after you keep working on it, the numbers will go up and down. But they will go up and down, kind of like the stock market, slowly getting lower. Slowly getting lower. By the end of the month, if you compare the end of the month to the beginning of the month, race the middle. You should be a little lower than when you started. At the end of the month, you can do it, you have a choice. You can do it for one more month. Never do it more than 2 months in a row. You can do it for one more month. If you think you're actually getting there, or maybe you're not getting there and you want a little bit more practice, yeah, you can do it for one more month. Or you can pick an entirely different fault to work on. And the reason you don't do it more than 2 months in a row is you need to work on something else and come back. The time away is just as important as the time you work on it. In about 6 months or so, you come back to it, you find you're back up at 27, but you will find that you will go back down to whatever the lower number was at the end of the month very quickly. You may be back at 27, but within a couple of days, you are actually going back to where you were. And you work out a little more. It's like chipping away at a rock, little bits. Sooner or later, you will, maybe get rid of that fault. You may at least decrease it, that you're not as annoying as other people, as you were. So you work, that's called a particular examination of conscience. And I know businessmen, they didn't call it that. I remember reading, a friend of mine, we went to a used bookstore. I was working at the orphanage in Mexico, and I came up here to the convent, and I have friends in Gulfport, and I went over to see them. While I was visiting them, the boy wanted to go out to a used bookstore, and I said, I want to go with you, because I always like to check to see what old books they have that I might be interested in. Well, when we came home, he had bought a paperback book, and it was called The Secret to Success, or something along that line. And he was explaining it to me. I said, that's just the particular examination of conscience. He says, what? I said, he was a Baptist. I explained to him, I said, we'd use that in the convent to overcome faults, but this guy is applying it to business. So, for example, he would say, he was applying it to something in business that you might want, let's say you want to work on getting contacts. So you're going to increase, you're a salesman, every day you're going to increase the number of contacts you get. So he was using the particular examination of conscience, examining on a daily basis, as the number of contacts, increasing the number of contacts, and saying by the end of the month how well you're working on it. Or maybe, pick some other area of business, maybe having your reports in on time, or whatever. He was applying, the author of the book was applying the same ideas, but in a commercial setting. Well, it was intended to be applied in a spiritual setting, but obviously it works. So, you might want to try both, it wouldn't hurt. But that's a particular examination of conscience. So, next time we're going to be talking about the fourth commandment. I don't know. I guess it'd be next Sunday, because Christmas is Friday, so, but anyway, we'll see how that goes. So next time will be the fourth commandment. And I'll see you then.